Hello, everybody. My name's Andrew Gray. I'm a solicitor at Truth Legal, and today I'm going to be speaking to my friend and colleague Louis McWilliam, who is the head of immigration here at Truth Legal. Today, the particular topic of conversation is going to be about sponsoring skilled chefs and why that's a big deal. So, Louis, explain, why is the sponsoring of skilled chefs in early 2021 a big topic in the immigration world?
Okay, thanks, Andrew. So the sponsorship of chefs has always been something of a controversial topic through the years. Originally, there was a restriction on chefs. You couldn't sponsor a chef if the business had a takeaway function, for example. They got rid of that, but it was still up until recently the case that if you wanted to sponsor a chef, it had to be a highly skilled chef, so a head chef, sous chef, such like, and you had to pay them normally 30 grand. So very, very, very restrictive rules, which meant that in practice, few restaurants could sponsor a chef. However, we now have some major changes which affect the wider immigration system, but specifically have quite an important bearing on chefs in particular.
And obviously, this is about chefs from outside the European Union or the European Union as well.
Good question. Previously, EU nationals could just come here under free movement. So any type of chef from the EU could come here. The restrictions I was talking about applied just to non-EU chefs, but
Gotcha.
Since the end of free movement, everyone's in the same boat in terms of new arrivals. So the new rules, which I'll talk about in a second, apply to everyone, whether EU or non-EU.
Now, I'm a terrible cook, awful, and therefore, in my mind, every chef is a skilled chef. So, what are the changes and what's the difference between a skilled chef and a not so skilled? I mean, if you're in a small restaurant, maybe there's only one chef and therefore you are the head chef. But if you're in a Michelin-starred restaurant and maybe you're a sous chef, you're more skilled than a head chef in a small place. I don't know. It's a world that I'm unfamiliar with. Would you give us more information?
Sure. So, like I say, the previous rule was that they had to be these skilled chefs, the kind of top-end chefs. The new rules say that you can just be a chef. So there's no sort of specification beyond that. It's just any kind of chef. The rules do say you cannot be a cook. So
Okay.
I'm not totally sure what the line is. I guess if you're a restaurant owner, you might be a bit clearer on the specific rules of a cook or a chef. But really, as long as you can get their main duties to be falling under this kind of chef heading, then you should be able to sponsor them. The other big change is that rather than having to pay at least 30 grand, that's come down to 25,600 or potentially less. So it's opened up the field a lot more.
And with the sort of wider world, then, are there any particular countries where chefs tend to come from? I was thinking perhaps, lots of maybe Chinese restaurants, Indian sort of cuisine. Are those countries all treated in a similar way? Are there any countries within those bans which, the UK sort of is more concerned about bringing chefs in from?
So, I mean, officially, the Home Office is supposed to treat individuals equally, but in fact, they tend to scrutinise much more closely people from certain countries. Pakistan, India, Iran have kind of traditionally been countries that come under particularly close scrutiny.
Yeah, that would make sense, I suppose, although the people from those countries, I'm sure, would be rather annoyed to hear that. I mean, do you actually need a lawyer then to help get a license to sponsor a chef, or can sort of a restaurant do it themselves?
So getting a sponsorship license, a sponsor license, is something you can do in yourself. It will take a lot of time and you'll have to pay very close attention to detail. So the Home Office have unbelievably got at least 3 guidance documents, about 70 pages each. You'll have to get on top of that. If you're able to get on top of that, then you still got to make the license application, and there's an increased chance you might get refused if you do it alone. So a lot of people opt to get help from an immigration lawyer like myself to guide them through the process.
Yes, yeah, it makes sense. 210 pages of paperwork, so a lot to get through for anybody. Even for lawyers, that's a lot to get through. I don't envy anybody navigating the system. Now, if a restaurant, say, has applied to sponsor a chef and there's been a refusal by the Home Office, is there a period of time that you can appeal that by? How does anyone go about contesting that decision? I mean, what are the prospects of overcoming such a decision from the Home Office?
Mm. So yeah, if you get your license application refused, there's two types of negative decision. You can get a rejection or a refusal. If it's a rejection, it's normally because you've just failed to include some key bit of evidence or information, and there's no real harm done. Then you just apply again. If you get what's called a refusal, then that's more problematic. You have a minimum 6-month ban on reapplying.
Wow.
And you kind of, if you've got some negative findings, they can tend to stick for the next time you apply. Even though officially you could apply after 6 months, you're going to have a harder application. So there are pretty high stakes in terms of getting it wrong.
And Louis, explain. Sorry, Louis. And is that 6 months a moratorium on hiring that particular person that you applied for, or just generally for the restaurant?
Yeah, we can't submit a new application until 6 months have passed. So absolute minimum 6 months delay, but probably quite a bit more than that. So you did ask, what you can do if you've been refused. So you could just sit it out and wait until you reapply. There isn't an official appeals process or even an official review process. However, I have had success in making representations to the Home Office through it's not an official channel, but they tend to be not as unreasonable as other Home Office departments can be. So if you can kind of set out your case clearly, you kind of always want to remain very cordial with the Home Office particularly the people dealing with sponsor licenses, and you might be able to get a positive outcome.
Gotcha. Fabulous. Is there anything else that people need to know about this incredibly complicated route? And I don't think we're going to do it justice in a few minutes when there's so much guidance, but any tips?
No, there's a huge amount to talk about, but one of the things is that if you're in the restaurant sector, which you probably are if you're listening to this, restaurants have been a high-profile target of the Home Office. They've seen restaurants as open to abuse of the immigration system, rightly or wrongly. So if you apply for a license, there's a fairly good chance you'll be inspected by the Home Office. And if you're inspected by the Home Office, so whether or not you're inspected, you're supposed to be complying with your sponsor license duties. I could bore you for hours with what those are. It's kind of
another day.
Another day. We'll leave it now. But yeah, so everyone has to be on top of this. But if you're a restaurant, you have to be particularly on top of it because you're going to be inspected probably to check you're on top of things. So it's not just a case of applying for the license and then that's the end of it. You have to make sure you're complying with all the other stuff as well.
And when there's an inspection by the Home Office, is the inspection for about one particular person, say that you've had sponsored, or will they go and check the immigration status of everybody that works there?
Good question. Yeah, so everyone's meant to be doing right to work checks. Of course, ourselves are meant to be doing right to work checks, but that becomes especially important. So they probably will look at right to work checks of everyone, not just the sponsored person. They'll interview the people responsible for the license. They'll check the recruitment practices. Intense interviews. They'll interview the person responsible for the license for a couple of hours. The migrant, if there's anyone sponsored, for a couple of hours. They call it a visit, but it's not. I mean, that's putting it in nice terms. It's really a forensic inspection.
Yes, you wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of one of those. So actually, the use of a lawyer. I mean, sorry, would you say then the use of the lawyer might reduce the risk of a inspection, or is it just a sort of bit of a lottery?
So yeah, I mean, there's getting the license itself, which can be tricky, but then there's also just understanding how it all works and getting your house in order, so to speak, so that if and when you get inspected, you are prepared for that.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Anything else, Louis, we need to know? Because I'm getting really hungry at the thought of all these amazing chefs bringing from around the world, bringing all their food to us. And also got quite excited as well in the process of the thought that actually it's easier now to come from other countries. The 30,000 is reduced, the skill set perhaps is reduced too. And I guess we should see an explosion of restaurants when restaurants can open, because obviously we're all shut at the moment during lockdown when we're recording this. Any other sort of top tips?
No, I think that's covered it. I think you're right. It is probably a good time to get the license in now. The rules have been relaxed. Don't know how long that'll last. So yeah, go for it while you can.
Fabulous. Thank you for your time, Louis. Have a good day.
Cheers, Andrew. Thanks.